We're talking about how we can approach things when our work feels meaningless and thankless. And with your work, you would interact with a lot of different people talking about their work, and I imagine a lot of people would be feeling this maybe right now.
Yep, especially when we hit this time of year. Where we haven't had a lot of sun necessarily. We've been in the winter months and people are starting to hit that time where they're feeling low. And if you're in a job where the meaning and the purpose, the deep sense of purpose and meaning isn't absolutely obvious, you can hit stages where you're like, what am I doing? Why am I even turning up to work? Now, I want to put aside for a moment ethical questions about work. So I sit down with people who sometimes have ethical problems with their work. That's a different question from does my work have meaning and does my work have purpose? Now, for those of us who work in things like radio, it's relatively easy to find the meaning and the purpose. But if you're sitting on a factory line every single day, or you're turning up and your boss isn't great and you don't feel like you're feeding into much of anything, it can be a big question. And I've been looking through the scriptures recently about what it actually means to be human. What are we doing as human beings on the planet? And there are a couple of verses that I want to link together here this morning. One is fairly well known. It's in Colossians chapter 3, verses 23 and 24, where Paul is writing to the church in a city, and he's telling them how to live as Christians, how to live as a new self, not to live as your old self. And one of the groups that he addresses, some Bibles translate them as bondservants. So the word is doulos in Greek. In Roman culture, a doulos is someone who is hired for 7 years to work in a household or work in a business, and they don't get paid in that time. They get paid when they get made free at the end. That's what a bondservant is. In the household of Caesar, it would be 14 years rather than 7 years. So Paul is giving instructions on how a bondservant should behave and how they should see their work. And he says, and a lot of people will be familiar with this, whatever you do, work heartily as for the Lord and not for people, knowing that from the Lord you will receive the inheritance as your reward. You're serving the Lord Christ. So that's nice. Sure, I can turn up and pretend that I'm working for Jesus, but is there anything deeper here? And I'm really captivated by the instructions that God gives to Adam and Eve in the garden, and the instructions that he gives to Adam. And so Genesis 2, verse 15, the Lord God took the man and put him in the Garden of Eden to work it and to keep it. That's the general instruction for all of humanity. When we're faced with creation, we're faced with the world around us, it is our job to work it and keep it. And if we dive in behind those words mean to cultivate it, to protect it, to guard it, kaitiaki, guardians. But we're not just guardians. We're people here to cultivate. We're here to beautify and to glorify. So whenever we sit down with someone, our question should be, how do I help beautify this person? Not in the physical sense. How do I
get rid of their pink eye?
Unless they want time off work, in which case pink eye is one of the best things to have. But that's a whole other discussion.
If you weren't listening before, I mentioned that just in case you were wondering.
How do we beautify and glorify this person? How do we take them to their highest end? Whatever our work is, how do we take what's in front of us and beautify and glorify? How do I step into a workplace, factory? How do I help the setting that I'm in become more beautiful and glorified?
How do you beautify a factory? How do you do that?
How do you beautify an office? Because, people work all kinds of jobs, like all sorts of things. And even when you're working in maybe a rewarding job or a job where you get a lot of feedback or praise or so, there's still times when people ask these questions of like, what am I doing? Or like, what's the point of this?
Yeah.
It can be any even a desirable position that other people would be like, oh, I'd love to do something like that. But those people can struggle too, just with the meaninglessness of sometimes the day-to-day.
Yeah. And the answer to that can change. Like your focus one day might be your work colleagues. You might decide, actually, I am finding the work meaningless, but I have colleagues. So how do I help them find their highest end? How do I help glorify them? How do I help beautify them? How do I help them in their life? Let's say you're an accountant, you're getting sick of the money, but you're dealing with accounts. How do you help these accounts go to their best end? How do you help these accounts be glorified? And I know that can sound really weird, but almost everything is about humanity taking hold of something, a raw material, whatever that raw material is, and taking it to its highest end. So if you work in a factory, how do you help this product be the best product it can be? How do you make sure that the setting you are in be the best that it can be? It might just be every day I'm going to make sure that when I leave, everything is clean and everything is tidy, and I've somehow improved the space. I've left it better than when I walked in here. Beautifying and glorifying. We do it with everything. It's our chief purpose in life, is to beautify and glorify, so that ultimately everything, and I'm going to use a big word here, everything is deified. Everything works towards God in some way.